Here's a quick demo of a Blender add-on I wrote. It's called Instancing++ and lets you first put empties along either the vertices, edges, or faces of an object you've selected, and you can also set a collection to instance each of those empties to. So here I have another object in a collection to instance, and each of those empties becomes that instance. So let's disable this instancing so we can see the axes of these empties. For a bunch of things I've been working on, the easiest way, at least for me, to visualize and understand these things is to use empties with their actual axes moved from the global origin to actually align with a different coordinate frame, as you can see here. And so when you have vertices selected, the z-axis becomes the vertex normal, and the other two are just chosen arbitrarily to be orthogonal. When you choose the edges, the z-axis is the midpoint between the two face normals that it joins, and the x-axis lies along the edge itself. And you can see the placement here is at the midpoint of the edge. And again, the y-axis is just chosen to be perpendicular to those two. And one thing to note is that you can't always maintain the right loop order to keep your x-axes always pointed in the same direction. You can see here on the top face, they're all pointing clockwise, but here, this one over here doesn't match up with the other two, and that's unavoidable, as far as I know. And then the last option is to add empties to the faces, which uses the face normal as the z and arbitrarily chooses one edge to make x parallel to, and then y becomes perpendicular to those two. This is maybe something that could change, but for now that does what I want. And with symmetrical faces like cubes or tetrahedrons or icosahedrons, dodecahedrons, etc., as long as you choose one of those edges, then and the object you want to instance is symmetric, it doesn't matter. And you can change which instance type you want to set and change the display size. And now we can re-enable that instance collection, and you can see we now have it on faces, but we can also turn it on for edges and vertices. And this is pretty nice. And you can see all of those empties get added to a single collection called instances. And over here, if we just look at what we're instancing, this object, if we start to transform it, you can see that as we translate about z, since we've defined those empties with their coordinate frames relative to the normal, moving in positive z is like moving radially outward from along the normal. And this gives a really nice effect. And likewise, if we wanted to rotate about one of those, you can see the ones on the edges rotate as if they were on the edge, because the x is the edge. Oh, we already did that. So anyways, the last thing I want to show is the comparison between using this approach and what I was working with earlier. So here I have another cube and the same spiral point as its child. And built into Blender is, if you're not familiar, is an object for instancing on the verts or the faces. So you can see there's no option to use the edges, probably because it's pretty ill-defined on what it would mean to instance on edges, but for my purposes, it's what I want to do. But so for these vertices, we can align to the vertex normal, and that's nice, especially you just have to double check that your relation has the right tracking axis. And so if you set here z, then the instanced objects plus z becomes the vertex normal, just like we have in the add-on. The issue, though, is that if we start translating this instanced object, translating along z doesn't actually change doesn't move them along the vertex normal like I wanted. And you can't have both vertex and faces selected at the same time. It's one or the other. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. You can't have vertex and faces selected together. So I'll leave a link to the GitHub project with this add-on, and I hope you find it useful.